Conquest, innovation, gunpowder. We combine these to form an explosive result. A territorial war between one of the fastest rising world powers and fastest falling world powers, Japan and China. In the middle of the two, the Korean Peninsula. The First Sino-Japanese War affected the entirety of Korea by finally breaking its Sinification and propelling the country into a new age of modernization that could not have been achieved by the Chinese themselves. And this is
the story of all of us.
Before war over Korea is even thought of, Japan comes out of a 200-year isolation, becoming a beast that would not be tamed until after the Second World War. On the other side of Korea, China. Recently weakened by an opium addiction and devastating attacks from the Manchu seizure, China is now known as the Qing Dynasty, the last dynasty China would ever know, showcasing their loss of grace and power in an answer to why Japan sees them as unfit to rule Korea.
The main difference in the quote-unquote rising empire and falling empire was how they went about their change in leadership. Japan chose the path of extensive reforms, industrialization, militarization, westernization, and the end of feudalism. After reform, Japan set their eyes on expansion. And at this point in time, Korea was a vassal state of the Qing. They were split into pro-Chinese and pro-Japanese supporters. However, even the Chinese supporters realized that the Qing might not be strong or competent enough to rule them at all. The Korean Peninsula itself was sought after because of its strategic positioning, its wide expanse of raw materials, and most prominently, their food supply.
13 years of hostility before any declarations are made between Japan and China, and the actual war only lasts for 8 months. 1886, 9 years before the war, Chinese naval sailors caused violent riots in Nagasaki. Japan demands a formal apology for the lives lost. The Qing gave them nothing but dust and blood. While this incident may not have been intentional, it only caused more tension between Japan and China. The Qing's unwillingness to apologize for their actions further proved how unfit they were to rule a vassal state like Korea. It also made war inevitable.
The Cok Rebellion, almost directly leading into wartime. What's really fascinating is that Korea actually believed they were receiving their independence. China backed them with 2,500 of their own troops, but while Korea was fighting against their own people, Japan watched. They didn't see Korea fighting for their independence. No, they saw the Qing violating the Convention of Tientsin by even setting foot in Korea. However, China did realize this, but they sent British mediators to Japan for them instead of facing them themselves. Japan realized China was getting messy and careless. They saw their opportunity, and in 1895, they would seize it.
13 long years of hostility, and finally, war. Japan wants to test their newly militarized strength, so the recently industrialized Imperial Japanese Army would declare war first. They attack only 2 days later. War begins, and Japan fights their first battle in centuries with the successful capture of Seoul in the heart of Korea. 5 days pass, and Japan forms a naval blockade. Under normal circumstances, this would be suicide, but Japan learned that Empress Dowager Cixi ordered naval funds to be siphoned into the renovations for a summer palace in Beijing. China is forced to attack on land. 1/7 of their troops are killed in action. The 3,000 remaining, Japan captures. Korea is the only battleground the First Sino-Japanese War has known, but not for long. Forced by Japan's superior military might and an incompetent Chinese empress, the Qing make one last stand on Korean soil.
China knew that if they lost Korea, they would not only lose the peninsula, but start losing their own lands in China as well. Even the empress realized this and sent reinforcements. The original 1,500 Qing in Pyongyang only had to wait until morning. But for many of them, morning never came. A battle lasting a whole 24 hours would ensue. Japan sustained 568 casualties. China held over 2,000 deaths, and another 4,000 either missing or injured. After this, Japan began their move into China. But first, they invaded Manchuria. They knew that the Manchus led China, and a strike to their leaders would further cripple the nation.
Once within Qing territory, Japan hits an infamous level. Marching through Lushunko, or Port Arthur, Japan massacres 20,000 Chinese civilians, with few actual servicemen within the group. With this callous war crime, Japan establishes their cruel dominance, telling China that if they dread it, run from it, Japan will win all the same, no matter the cost. Continuing their march, they capture Mukden, Jiuyan, and Taiyuan quickly, until they reach Walway. The city withstood a 23-day siege without ample assistance from the Qing army, who was hunkered down in the capital of Beijing. In March, 1 month later, Japan took Yingkou, Manchuria, and the Pescadores Islands near Taiwan. With these territories, the Qing realized Japan was close to Beijing and formally requested a treaty.
The Chinese government had fallen so low that they failed to support their own military and had to resort for suing for peace. They were honestly humiliated by a country that was isolated for 2 centuries and had not fought for longer than that. In April of 1896, the Treaty of Shimonoseki did a few things. It really hammered in the fact that China was not fit to rule. It showcased their fall from grace and Japan's subsequent superiority. China really had no power over the treaty's terms, ceding Taiwan, the Pescadores, and the Liaodong Peninsula, recognizing Korea as independent of China and relating to Japan, and paying tribute with extensive trading privileges solely to the land of the rising sun.
The First Sino-Japanese War's influence over the parties involved is insurmountable, yet it is a relatively unknown war. Because of Japan's victory, China was seen for what it truly was, a weakened and crippled dynasty, a mere shadow of what it once was. Because of this, new countries began to take advantage of Qing China. It also showed the corruption, addiction, and anti-foreign ideals within China's government that caused their downfall in the first place. On the other side of the war, Japan fared much better. They received all resources and influence as stated in the treaty, as well as showing off their transformation from isolationism, planting their inevitable transcendence into a world power. And finally, Korea. Japan advised Korea to cut all ties with China, since Sinification would now be less a blessing than a curse. Japan also aided Korea in reformation, the abolition of slavery. The upper class lost all special privileges. Outcasts were abolished. Equality of law between gender and race, the adoption of the Gregorian calendar, and education as a whole was improved upon and extended. There was no way that China, failing as it was, would have been able to set Korea on the path of national identity and betterment that Japan succeeded in. In conclusion, the First Sino-Japanese War created the Kingdom of Korea by finally breaking its Sinification and propelling the country into a new age of modern reform that could not have been achieved by the Qing dynasty. Concluding this and looking at the war as causing the world to see the once powerful as weak and the once weak as powerful, with the oppressed finally freed, is not too dissimilar to the Korean belief of yin and yang. It truly was
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.